Good news, apparently all Americans are getting a Honda under the second stimulus package. Steve Mnuchin said his top priority this week is to ensure we all get a clean CR. Nancy Pelosi heard that and said, I guess I don't qualify for an accord. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. This is LALATE. Hope you're good and safe. This is Afternoons LALATE, part of our 3.5-hour programming schedule every day here on LALATE. LALATE Afternoon starts every day at 3:30 with the check. This video, think of as a hazard pay. Then FPUC, and finally rent. Tune into all those videos. A lot of exciting details coming up every half hour today. And if there was ever a time to like and subscribe to this channel, it would be now. As optimism grows overnight that stimulus checks will be sent out by President Donald Trump amid funds located by the president and explained in a press statement last Friday. More about that in a minute. Additionally, heating up this afternoon, incredible, shocking new details are comments by who else but Mark Meadows about the stimulus package, Steve Mnuchin, and Larry Kudlow. And if you like people with multiple personalities, you'll love these reports because really, it shows them even changing their story, not just from last week, but actually in the same interview, they're changing their story. More about that in a second. Let me get to the incredible details right now. I saw some of your comments earlier today about what's going on with stimulus and what's going on with this executive order that is potentially looming on the horizon. And one of the overriding comments on this morning's LALATE video was the question of, well, if that money has been sitting around, why has the president not used it? It's a really great question, and here are possible answers to the question. First of all, the president last Friday said that he has identified $300 billion that can be used for stimulus checks, that he's ready to send out the stimulus checks with that money, and that he believes he can do it. Earlier, and that the money is money that was allocated for other COVID-19 relief in March, but it was unused. These are all important facets to understand his ability to do it. As I detailed earlier today, I said he can do it, he can send it, there's enough money, and he can do it right away. To which viewers had a very great comment, which was, why didn't he do it beforehand? Here are possible answers. One, the money is, as he has already explained, was part of a package for COVID-19 relief that was dedicated for some purpose but was unused. So clearly he could not have used it back in March or April because it was dedicated for a purpose. That purpose seems to have expired, and those funds are sitting around now unused. When they came unused, he's not telling us. When they became expired in a prior program, he's not telling us. But it would not have been back in March. I mean, that's certainly not the routing. What was the program that $300 billion was to be used for? We really don't know. But the great news as we sit here today is that this is money that he has identified is not in Treasury. And by not being in Treasury, he does not need executive orders. He does not need order of Congress to send it out. He can send it out himself. What I detailed last night, and I'm continuing to detail right now, is that by isolating and indicating the location of the funds in a press statement on Friday, that now tees up his ability to really do what he may want to do, which is send out stimulus checks. There's enough money, first of all, $300 billion. It's enough based upon the number of households who were paid under the first stimulus package to get them a $1,200 check. Ironically, let me go to two subsections of that discussion. First, some Republicans don't want to give you a $1,200 check if you're a dependent. They want to give you a $500 check. So that would mean there's actually more money available than even needed. Second, the first stimulus package certainly did not pay adult dependents. We know that. If you're on SSDI, SSI, Social Security, or railroad benefits, you did not get a first stimulus check if you are a dependent on someone else's tax return and over 17 years of age. This time around, the Republicans and the president want to give you a stimulus check. Well, that would mean that there's more people getting stimulus checks than the first time around. Yeah, there comes that interesting math. So you would need more money to send out more checks this time around. Well, based upon my calculations, $300 billion is still enough money. So that's the great news for that. It answers that question. Next, where is this money? The most important answer to that question is we know where it's not. It's not in Treasury. Treasury is a bank. You would envision it as a big old bank. The money sits in there. You can't go to the bank and make a withdrawal unless you have Congress issuing a bill, and in order to allow you to withdraw the money. And it would be dedicated for a purpose. Here, the money has already been withdrawn. It was withdrawn in the spring, in March or April, for another emergency pandemic purpose. It was dedicated for that purpose, then unused, and is now sitting around remaining unused. What's incredible, great news that you only hear on this channel, a lot of other exclusives, not excuses. It's one of those days that I'm detailing today, is that there's more than $300 billion sitting around for this president to use. There's upwards of about $500 billion this channel can report. The reason why I know that is, anyone else can figure it out. You look at the amount of funds that were dedicated for programs that have been returned by either court order or by order of Treasury and are now sitting around unused. It's about $200 billion. So we're about $500 billion that's sitting around that the president can route out and send to American people. So viewers overnight on last night's evening's LALATE video said absolutely, categorically, overwhelmingly, viewers said they had always believed the president would send out the stimulus checks by executive order. They never thought it was going to come by bill. Their comments generally said the reason why they thought it was going to be done that way is because the president wants to take credit for it. He did not want Congress, a legislative body with a lot of people in there, to take credit for sending out the stimulus checks. Additionally, viewers basically co-signed my presentment of facts last night that in March, sending out stimulus checks gave the president a 3% point jump in the polls. Viewers unanimously believe that would potentially happen, or is potentially among the motives why the president wants himself to send out the stimulus checks and not Congress. All right, so now as we sit here, we know more details about why it's could come by executive order and not by legislative bodies, because new data released minutes ago shows that the bill introduced to the Senate yesterday by Mitch McConnell is not $500 billion, but $500 to upwards of $750 billion. It's way higher than originally thought. By that calculation, you could not have put stimulus checks in it at $300 billion, because then you would be at $1 trillion, which was not what they intended to do. So, will there be executive order? Ultimately, it depends on the president. It depends on the president, and there was a lot of analysts on morning business channels this morning saying that they are just waiting and ready for the president to do massive stimulus spend if he sees himself behind in the polls. They categorically believe, this is Wall Street, categorically believes that this president thinks that he has to spend if he's behind in the polls, and spending means sending out stimulus checks. No one in their right mind at this point that was interviewed this morning thinks that no stimulus checks will come from this president. They just they only see that as a scenario if he's dramatically ahead in the polls, which he's not. Polls either put it as a dead race or slightly behind in swing states. So with that, there is more great and sort of screwy news coming out today about those checks as well. First, I want to address something, because I address everything on this channel. There is unconfirmed, speculative, gossipy, National Enquirer-ish chatter that executive order is coming this weekend. I want to fully give you my statement about the situation. There is no confirmed statement. It is purely speculative. It's about as speculative now as the Dodgers will win the World Series next year. It's completely speculative at the moment. There was a series of comments that appeared on this channel, and I saw them earlier today. I allowed them to remain posted, where someone had heard that there's an executive order coming this weekend. Maybe the person's confirmation is correct. I cannot confirm it, so I'm not going to report it as news, but I am going to tell you it's out there. It is gossip at the moment. But it's important to understand when you hear something, whether it's gossip or facts, that's gossip at the moment. Now, then there's Mark Meadows and Steve MNUCHIN, who apparently think we just don't remember anything. Mike Pence last week, nobody wants to give direct payments to American people more than the President Donald Trump. We sent those checks to American families and helped them through the hard times, and we'll do it again. MNUCHIN last week, we'd like to enhance unemployment, and we'd like to send out more economic impact checks. Last week. That's last week, Steve MNUCHIN. Those have been critical to our economy. Okay. A, he wants to send them out. B, this is when asked about this week's bill. And 3, he says they're critical. What's important is getting out money to American families. There's a tremendous area of agreement, and that's what we should be doing right away. Okay, we should be sending out stimulus checks right away. This was Steve MNUCHIN's comments less than 7 days ago. I would publicly be willing to sit down at the negotiation table with no conditions whatsoever. Moving forward on a bipartisan let's move forward on a bipartisan basis on points we can agree upon. The president and I want to move forward. Again, stimulus checks. He just said the sentence ahead of it. Stimulus checks. We agree upon stimulus checks. There's no disagreement that they agree on stimulus checks. So why are there no stimulus checks in yesterday's bill? Well, sometimes people really just don't like politicians. And this might be one of the days that you really don't like them. Because let's read Steve MNUCHIN's comments minutes ago. You just heard his comments from last week. Let's read his comments from minutes ago. When asked what his top priority is today, Steve MNUCHIN, who is waiting for a van with a pool of reporters. Steve MNUCHIN walked by on his way from the West Wing building to Treasury. He was asked a quick walk and asked to talk with a pooler. The pooler asked him about what's your focus this week. Guess what he said? The focus for the moment is 2 things. One, making sure we get a clean CR done, and obviously working with the Senate on what we'd like to call the targeted bill. So now his focus is not getting out stimulus checks. He just said last week his focus was getting out stimulus checks. Now he says his focus is doing a clean CR, and doing this thing, this thing that Mitch did yesterday, this crapola thing. That was his first time he was interviewed today. I got his next interview for you. It gets more screwy. When asked about whether or not this is the final stimulus bill this year, Steve MNUCHIN last week said, no, we want to do 2 stimulus bills. We want to do this one, and then right after this, we'll do the other things we can't agree upon, like state and local, money for families, for food. And then he, remember he listed those things, and he talked about $650 billion. I mean, I've done this video like 20 times since last week, and I ran his quote, and he said, we'll do that. And I originally said it was going to be October, but then it looked like it was September. Okay, so he was asked that same question again today. When are you doing the next stimulus bill? Are there chances of another relief bill this year? I don't know. We'll see. I hope there is. I mean, it's important to a lot of people out there. It's also important that you keep your stories right, Steve. Okay, he's not the only one doing this to us. Then there's Mark Meadows, Moving Meadows. Remember Moving Meadows? Yeah, all last week, Mark Meadows said this week's stimulus bill would have stimulus checks in it. It was something that we can all agree upon. Let's move ahead on everything we can agree upon. Why not have something in it that we don't agree upon? Well, he was asked yesterday about the stimulus package. He was not asked why there are no checks in there, but he said this is the things we can agree upon. Okay, changing his story. But Mark Meadows really, you got to give it to the guy. He not only can't keep his story straight in 1 week, he can't keep his story straight in the same interview. So he was then asked, what is the likelihood that this bill introduced yesterday, which will give $300 for enhanced unemployment benefits to millions of Americans, and will cover, and will pick up when LWA is about to expire, so it is really helpful to millions of Americans. And if you calculate the number of weeks, it goes all the way to December 31st, about $6,000. For those working Americans, it is an important bill. Remember, last week, Mark Meadows said several times this bill will be passed in 1 week. It will be introduced this week, and it'll be passed in 1 week. What did he say today? Well, in one interview, he first starts by saying, it'll be paid, it'll be passed by Christmas. And then later in the interview, he says, I'm optimistic it's going to pass right away. He first says, when asked if it'll pass before the election in November, I'm not sure. Obviously, but I do believe we'll see that. What? Then later in the same interview, he says that he was asked, well, do you think it's going to pass, next week? I'm more optimistic perhaps today than I've been in a long time. Well, you weren't optimistic about 25 seconds before that when you said you don't think it's going to pass until maybe after the election? What is with these people? I mean, do they just have too much coffee or something? They cannot keep a straight statement. And then he says this wonderful thing. I can tell you that there's more that we can agree upon than we disagree upon. And I think it's time to put politics aside and pass a stimulus. Okay, well, that's what he said last week when he said stimulus checks. And this week he doesn't have stimulus checks in there. Of course, I had to end with Larry Kudlow, the king of cray-cray. If you didn't think that was all crazy enough, let me give you Larry Kudlow. If you could find 5 to 6 things we can agree upon, let's do it, and let's all do it. The president's led. He's put his own EIDLs out there, and he's doing everything we need to do. But if we agree on 5 to 6 things to agree on, let's do it. Larry Kudlow last week had the same exact quote. And of the 5 to 6 things he included in the 5 to 6 things was stimulus checks. This week, the 5 to 6 things don't include the stimulus checks. But as he says, let's just do it. My response is, why isn't the darn checks in the bill? As to the vote, when will the vote for the stimulus bill occur? I could have led with that. I could have led with that on this video as well. There's new indication today as we sit here on a Wednesday afternoon that the Senate will vote on it tomorrow. Boy, that's fast. But there's claim that it won't avoid a filibuster by the Democrats. Boy. So as we sit here today, what's going to happen with this executive order? It's, people are looking at Congress and just really considering it a hot mess express. But when you look at Trump's cabinet members, the president's cabinet members really can't keep a straight face and a straight story by the hour, let alone the same interview, which causes you to wonder if it's the president causing that to happen or them. I reported yesterday that if you look at everyone's comments about giving you stimulus checks in this bill, all those comments were said by these cabinet members before the president said last Friday he wants to give you stimulus checks. As soon as he said he wants to give you stimulus checks by his own accord, they got off that story. The question is, was that ever the story? And I detailed last night, and I'll explain it again, that I don't think it ever was the story. I don't think we were told a true and correct statement. I don't think that when Meadows, MNUCHIN, KUDLOW, and Pence said that stimulus checks were going to be in this bill next week, I don't think we were told the correct answer, and I'll tell you why. Unless there's some strange miscalculation that I don't see. We now know, even this afternoon, just minutes ago, that the bill introduced yesterday is upwards of $700 billion, not $500 billion. So if you're going to put checks on top of that, you're at $1 trillion, which exactly was what they said they would not do. So where was the $300 billion ever to go? As viewers of this channel say, it was to go by executive order. What is the routing time to receive the stimulus checks? How much would you receive? How would you get them? And how would they come? This routing time is still the same amount of time as if it was coming by Congress. The moment the president signs the executive order, you would generally count about 10 days thereafter to see the department that has the money to send it out. What you need to understand is that this money is not in IRS, it's not in Treasury, it's somewhere else, and that agency is the one that's going to send out the payments. Who's going to be the agency sending out the payment? Well, you can sort of choose among the possible candidates: CDC, FEMA. It's going to be one of these sort of ancillary agencies that have nothing to do with Treasury that could be sending out the payments, because he says it's in a fund that was dedicated for COVID-19 relief that was not used. It's also possible it's in SBA's coffers. As I've been reporting, there's upwards of, 200 something billion dollars of PPP money never accounted for. If you look at all the stimulus bills before, the amount of monies that were not used, the largest amount of money not used is PPP money. There's nothing even close to it. So it's highly likely that this is unused PPP money that doesn't go back into the Treasury. It doesn't go anywhere. It just sort of sits there. PPP has expired. There's no new round of PPP that is open currently. I mean, this is a bill. It's not a law. But there's no new round of PPP open for people to use this PPP money. So can the president send it out? Yes. Would he send it out? It is possible. Who would challenge it? Virtually no one would possibly have a good argument to challenge it. First, state attorney generals would have no basis to really challenge it because it's not impacting their state residents. There's nothing negatively impacted by a person receiving a stimulus check. The Democratic group could certainly go to court and argue against it, but it would really be political suicide to say don't give stimulus checks to American citizens on the eve of the election. With that, everything is really teed up to make sense that this would be sent out. He would want you to have it. It would help him. But what I've always said, and what I've always really held true to be, is that when you're betting on things, usually Wall Street hears things before anyone else. And what they have said universally in analysts' interviews today is that the polls are too close, the polls are too tight, that the president can't sit around and do absolutely nothing and won't be doing anything. He'll be throwing stimulus everywhere, just not today. The question is whether it's this weekend. Boy, a lot of excitement, a lot of details. It's a very fluid situation. A new promise and a new surprise. If we get to 250,000 subscribers in the next 48 hours, I will release unseen footage ever seen from this channel, what was shot as a 100,000 subscriber special. So we're about 8,000 away from 250. If we can get to 250 in the next 48 hours, I'll release that incredibly great special, which shows behind the scene footage you've never seen about this channel, about what happened and things you've never heard of. So go to the front of this channel and hit the subscribe and alert button so you get an alert when a new video goes live. If you go to the comments and you don't see a little red thing next to your name, you're not publicly subscribed. Go into the pinned comments of this video about how to unsubscribe and resubscribe. That will ensure that you see a red pin next to your name. I respond to people who are subscribers before people who are not subscribers. Next, like this video. It really helps in the algorithm so that this video appears higher in the algorithm and higher in search results than videos that don't answer people's questions. You've been doing a great job. We've been really killing it, so let's keep it up. Great news. Coming up next is hazard pay. Big developments about hazard pay. Protests across the country continue to expand. FPUC is up after that with new details about when payments are coming for LWA and new confusion about what could happen with FPUC 2.0 if this bill doesn't pass. Finally, rent. New details I've never uncovered before on rent, eviction moratoriums, and mortgage forbearance that you need to tune into. As always, stay informed, stay motivated, stay smiling, and stay available.